why don't you have a look again and sit back here?
Okay.
Let's all come sit over here and show you our beautiful sacred worship space. I have a little bit of the history of the cathedral to tell you about, and you may not be aware that we did undergo a complete restoration of the interior of the church just over 10 years ago now. So I talk about some of the highlights of that restoration. So as far as the history of the church, beginning at the beginning, this is the third church we built on this very spot. The first church was built here in 1879. It was a small wooden church destroyed in a prairie fire just 3 years later, replaced by a second church, a brick structure, which stood here until 1915, when it was picked up and moved to another corner of the property for the parish to use while the cathedral was being built. And the bishop at the time chose this spot for the cathedral because of our proximity on the hill, looking out over the city. We are a beacon on the hill, and we can be seen from miles around in this area. So construction on the cathedral began in 1915. The cornerstone was placed in 1916. The first masses were held here in December of 1918, and it was formally dedicated in May of 1919. So we did celebrate our 100th anniversary 2 years ago already. So the structure of the church itself, you may not have noticed the beautiful foundation of the church, which is quartzite, which is locally quarried. We have quartzite outcroppings throughout the city of Sioux Falls. If you have visited Falls Park in town here, that is a quartzite outcropping. And there's a major quarry right along I-29 from which they take quartzite still. So that's the beautiful foundation. The main structure of the church itself is Bedford limestone. Came from Bedford through Indiana by rail in 3 to 5 ton blocks, which were then milled right on the site for the building of the church. So what's new for the restoration here in the church, you came through our heavy wooden front doors. Sometime in the 1970s, those doors, or early 1970s, the original doors were removed and replaced with clear glass doors. There was a big push at the time to get more natural light in the building. So now we have those restored to what we consider to be liturgically correct. We come into our sacred space, we shut out the outside or secular world so we're not distracted by what's going on outside. Also new for the restoration are our beautiful marble floors. I was just doing some reading online by a stonemason site who was speaking about the cathedral, and I didn't even know that till now. There are 24 different marbles in the cathedral now because of the restoration. Before that, there was no marble. It was all stone. The flooring was a simple stone floor from Minnesota stone. It was very well-worn and cracked. And our bishop at the time, Bishop Swain, had a vision for what he wanted his church to look like from the restoration. And the beautiful marble floor is part of that vision. So we see the marble extends to the bases of these pillars around the church, the wainscoting around the perimeter, and I'll have you look to your right, I think it's easier to see. The wainscoting around the perimeter is also marble. These columns, though, are not marble. The round ones especially, are a hollow plastered shell that can conceal steel beams that carry the weight of the ceiling. So they are treated with a beautiful full paint and finish to look like marble. They were all literally painted with pheasant feathers. So at these columns, if you look at the top, the beautiful pediment up there, we have so much meaning and symbolism within the church, and we begin here with these, what they refer to as red torches, and they symbolize the eternal flame of our faith, or perhaps the tongue of fire from Pentecost, which rested over the heads of the disciples in the upper room. Above each column, in the ceiling, we have these beautiful urns. They're urns of plenty, with fruits and vines of the earth spilling across the ceiling of the church and spilling out of the urn. The larger items here are pineapples, which are symbols of hospitality and welcome. Then we see bunches of grapes and other fruit here. We have an ear of corn within the vineyard. These are all symbols of gifts of our Creator and a reminder of the Garden of Eden. And then above each archway we have the 12 apostles with their banners telling us who each one is. Now this space is designed to lift our minds and hearts to the Lord. Also, at the same time, focus our attention in sanctuary. That is the focal point, the purpose of the church. So we see, you look over your shoulder, you can see that for the most part, all the apostles are facing the front of the church. And then while we're looking back, you can see our beautiful pipe organ there. That is Hendrickson, Minnesota, from Hendrickson, Minnesota. They were new in 1991, replacing the original organ from 1935. There are 3,292 pipes in that organ, with 62 ranks and 44 stops on the organ console. The tallest pipe on the left-hand side center is over 18 feet tall and weighs over 100 pounds. The smallest pipes are just a few inches tall, weighing just a few ounces, and they fall behind the screening there. We have a beautiful rose window above the organ depicting Christ, the King of the nations. So we see Christ there arrayed as King, and he is surrounded by people from all the nations of the earth in adoration. And there's some text in the archway over the organ. Deum laudamus, your God, we praise you. You are the Lord, we confess you, or profess you. That is the prayer known as the Te Deum, several stanzas long, and it is prayed daily by the members of our clergy in the office of the church. Over our heads are the beautiful chandeliers. Now, they closely resemble the original chandeliers that had been removed in the 1970s again and replaced with spotlights in the ceiling, which lit our hymnals very well. But when we looked up, we were literally blinded by the light. So with this restoration, we have these chandeliers restored, designed to highlight the art and architecture, allowing us to look up without being blinded by the light. So they're a beautiful addition to the church during the restoration. I'll talk a little bit about the other stained glass windows here in the church. Stained glass were all installed in 1947, give or take. Prior to that, the windows were just a frosted glass. So each window here in the nave of the church, and I skipped that part, nave coming from the Latin word navis for ship. So this is our ship of faith. This is our ark, the Noah's Ark, our refuge from the outside world. Being here in the cathedral, keeping us right-minded when we come into our church, listen to the gospel, because a lot of what we know as Christians is the opposite to what we learn out in the secular world. So the windows here in the church, each have a particular theme, beginning on the north side with missionaries, servants of the church, doctors of the church. The third window, Thomas Aquinas featured there, he being the most notable theologian in Christianity. And then the nearest one are patrons of youth, having established schools and orphanages and seminaries for poor or impoverished children. The south side, the first window are priests, then you have bishops, popes, and then women of the faith. The women have in common that they were abused in their lifetimes by the family members and men who had them in their care. We see all of these people are portrayed holding something. They have text featuring something that was important in their lifetime, something they championed throughout their ministry. Martyrs of the church, martyrs of the faith, typically are portrayed with the instrument of their death. So we see that here in some people who were martyred for their faith, and meaning they were killed because they were professing their faith as Christians. On the front facade of the church outside, we have, again, Christ the King on the throne, and he is flanked by Peter and Paul. Peter holding the keys of the kingdom, and typically we see St. Peter portrayed holding the keys of heaven and earth. And then St. Paul holding the sword, he being martyred for his faith, by being beheaded, so he is portrayed holding the sword. So that is what we're seeing with persons portrayed in the church, portrayed as something that was important to their ministry, or also something that called for their martyrdom. Any questions right now? Let's see, I feel like I'm skipping something because we started here. I usually start my tours out in the entrance of the church. But I will just say that the church, for the most part, you could consider it a 3D Bible. We tell the story of Christ's birth, his death, his resurrection, Christ the King, the stations of the cross around the perimeter of the building tell the story of the Passion of Christ, Good Friday. The people we see from the centuries in between Christ actually living on earth and our time are portrayed. We have a good cross-section of people here, a good, I forgot, it was Saint, my Bible story. Cloud of witnesses, that's the phrase I'm coming up with. The letter to the Hebrews, you'll read about a cloud of witnesses, and that's what we have featured here. They witness for us by the way they lived their lives, and some by the way they died. Great witnesses to the faith, so this is our cloud of witnesses. And a lot of the symbolism in the church goes back to the time when people were illiterate and, for the most part, very poor. They couldn't afford a Bible, even if they could read. So a lot of the symbolism takes us back to that time, as in a picture telling a story. A picture tells a story of 1,000 words. So that is what a lot of the symbolism in the church is for. The baldacchino features the angels on the roof. You see them in different postures of prayer. These symbols here, or medallions, are the crown of thorns and the 3 nails that held to the cross. The roof is tiled and leaves, also reminiscent of the Garden of Eden. Marble columns, those are solid marble. They each weigh 8,000 pounds. It's 4 tons of marble per column. To accommodate the weight of this new, the fancy word for it is the baldacchino. The original floor was removed, and there are 4 concrete piers that go through the lower level of the church into the ground. They come up through the floor at this height, and then they're wrapped in the black marble. So each marble column is standing on a concrete pier. So that all reference for the main altar here, and you see symbols on the front. I know you can't make it out from this distance, but there are 4 Greek letters within that wreath on the front of the church. The 2 larger ones are the Chi and Rho, or Chi Rho. Symbolize the first 2 letters of Christ in Greek, and then superimposed, it looks like RP and X, becomes a Christogram, a symbol for Christ. And then within the arms of the Chi are the 2 Greek letters Alpha and Omega, the first and last letter, the Greek alphabet. And the book of Revelation tells us that Jesus is the Alpha and Omega, the beginning